Welcome to the channel and welcome to the show. My name is Reni, a pagan from the beautiful country of the Netherlands, and today we are talking about an aspect of Norse and Germanic mythology that is not discussed a lot. In fact, it is so rare that I don't even know how to pronounce it. It's an entity that was created out of the spit of all the Aesir and the Vanir gods together. So this episode is here to talk about, that's what he's called. I think I'm going to go with Kavasir. That sounds good. This episode is here to talk about Kavasir, talk about his symbolism. And since he was created out of the spit of all the gods, we're here to talk about spit magic as well. Yes. Nobody online is talking about spit magic. I hear people talking about blood magic, making it look real cool and edgy. Dark, ooh, blood, I bleed on stuff. Scary, dark, cool, ooh. And I see people talking about sex magic. Ooh, sex magic, sexy, dark, ooh, exciting. Yet there's nobody talking about spit magic. Well, I'm going to be an advocate for spit magic today. Somebody has to do it, goddammit. So follow me on this episode and hit the like and subscribe button if you would like to hak tua with me all the way to Valhalla. Yes, I'm a bit late with that meme. If I would have made this video like 2 months before, you guys would have loved it. Now I'm just like running behind the trends again. What it is with spit magic and why I brought up blood magic and sex magic is your bodily fluids have something magical about them. Meaning that your DNA is in there. Meaning everything that makes you you and all your ancestors are also in there. When you perform magic, your own bodily fluids are like your own signature. But it's kind of like your spiritual signature, it's like your magical signature. It could be even interpreted as a 5-dimensional signature of who you are, everything you will be, everything you came from, and everything that is you in the broadest sense of the word. So people talk a lot about blood magic and sex magic because it sounds cool. But for a lot of purposes, you can also use spit. I've done magic where I've done spit as a signature in my magical practice. Now, in olden days, I don't know if you've ever seen this in a movie where men say we are blood brothers, and they get a knife and they get their hand and they cut their hand so it bleeds, and the other guy does that too, and then they shake their hands and they become blood brothers. That's because the blood of the one person, meaning everything that he is, ever was, and ever shall be, his ancestors, and the same of that other guy, meets in that very special place and they touch. So that's kind of like a blood magic ritual as well. So that's kind of explaining spit magic. I'll promise not to bring out that meme every time I say spit magic. That could be a separate episode. Is the hak tua girl actually doing spit magic? I will tell you the story of Kavasir. Like I said, most of you know that there once was a war between the Aesir and the Vanir, or as we say in Dutch, the Asen and the Vanen. It took a long time. And at the end, no side could truly win. There was a truce. That's how the Aesir, like Odin and Thor, got Freya, Freyr, and Njord. They were prisoners of war. But when the battle was done, they all spit in a vat. And out of that spit, an entity was created, Kavasir. He was incredibly wise, and legend has it that there was not one question that he did not have an answer to. So he traveled the world teaching people. Now there were 2 dwarves who saw him and who led him into an ambush. And they killed Kavasir. They killed him and they used his blood to create a substance called the mead of poetry. There was a special mead made from his blood that was so intoxicating that everybody who drank that became the best at writing poetry. What you had in the meat of poetry was the literal definition of inspiration from the gods. The gods spit in a vessel, and with spit magic they created a being. That being was killed, and then this blood was made in a blood magic ritual to create the mead of poetry. When Odin heard about this, he was first angry that they killed Kvasir, but he was intrigued about this mead of poetry. He must acquire it. Now, in the meantime, there were two giants, or there was a giant, and he stole it from the dwarves, and he hid it under a mountain. But Odin was determined to taste the mead of poetry. And that's how, in fact, he also became the god of poetry. Because Odin is the god of a lot of things. He's basically, he created so many gods, he's basically the god of gods. So I will keep the long story short, and he first needed to get into the mountain, and he transformed into a snake. And he went into the mountain. In the mountain, the giant had his daughter guard the mead of poetry. So what he did, he transformed again. He transformed into a very beautiful young man. He transformed into Channing Tatum when he does Magic Mike. I don't know. You fantasize something. Liam Hemsworth when he does Marvel's Thor. I don't know. And what he did is he seduced the giant. He put on all the moves and he told her, if I can sleep with you for 3 nights, you can I then have 3 sips of the mead of poetry? Because all that was left of Kvasir were these 3 vats, massive vats, which all contained the mead of poetry. Well, of course, Odin, being convincing and magical as he is, I wanted to say being the fuckboy that he is, but that would be a bit harsh. He got the job done. But he didn't just take 1 sip from the mead of poetry. No. When he got to the vat, he drank the whole vat. After 3 days, the daughter of the giant found out that what he'd done, and she became very angry. She called her father, and her father came after him. Rah! So he transformed into a falcon, and he flew out the mountain straight to Asgard. Giant also transformed into a giant bird, and they were chasing each other through the heavens. Odin just made it to Asgard before him, and he made sure that the mead of poetry was safe. And now the mead of poetry is again the property of the gods, and they can bestow it on who they see fit. That's, in short, the story of the mead of poetry. So what does that all mean? Because these old stories usually have a very deep meaning. Well, it shows that in old Norse and Germanic cultures, they held poetry and indeed the arts in very high regard. And that was in olden days, but now I think that's very much the same. I think a lot of this superficial culture that we have of worshipping celebrities comes from that same place. I think the meaning is that the people who do poetry, but in modern days who do movies, who do art, if they're really good, they have something divine about them. There's divine inspiration in good art. It was so in the olden days, and it was still to this day. Like, say, George Lucas, who made the first 3 Star Wars movies. There's something divine about that, I think. Peter Jackson, who made the Lord of the Rings trilogy, there's something divine about that. You can't pinpoint like, oh, it's this god, it's that god, and you can't really grasp it, but there is something divine. What that is the mead of poetry. Because you have to admit, I mean, let me know in the comments if you agree, that good art, good movies, there's something divine about it. Now we're getting into the part of the video that's not fact, not just my thoughts. We're getting into a bit of dubious speculation. I think we've all seen those videos about, for instance, The Simpsons, cartoon show that continuously predicts the future. There are lots of examples. Look it up online. Donald Trump being president, Apple, lots of stuff. They predicted a lot of stuff. Creators of The Simpsons also create art. Could it be that, this is my conspiracy theory when it comes to The Simpsons, that there are some people on that show who are so creative that they don't predict the world, that they create the world? That each Simpsons episode is like a magical ritual where they actually pen something down which then affects reality in the fact that it makes it true in reality. I don't know if you agree with this, but there is a connection between being creative and our own Asgard, our own divinity. Creation and holiness are very closely linked. Not always, because let's be honest, when I do a painting, it's shit, and most of us aren't that good. But there are some people who have drank from the mead of poetry. And in their art, there is something divine. And I think that's what it's all about. Now, you could also argue that, by the way, if you interpret this story in a more literal sense, that Odin first has to go into a mountain as a snake and, tussle with a giant. Well, not actually, practically have to fuck a giant, but still. That you need to go deep inside yourself. Then you have to find something, and then you have to go back up again. Because deep under the mountains in ourselves is where we find our own inspiration, our own darkness. And if we can bring that to the light, that's where divine inspiration and the meat of poetry comes from. You could see it like that, but that's another part of the dubious speculation kind. Like I said, if you agree, let me know. If you don't agree, also let me know. And I'll see you next week. Keep sipping on that meat of poetry. Ga met de goden.